Players cannot use the core stratagems found in the core rules. Instead, they can use the stratagems found below. These are the words in the monthly Games Workshop publication, which comes with additional Underdog rules to give bonuses to the player with the lower victory points, an aspect not seen in 40k, but common in Age of Sigmar. And there are new stratagems to replace the core stratagems. What is going on here, and why would Games Workshop want to change the core stratagems? I am Christian von Carmian, and I am going to take you on a journey that spans 10th edition and may go beyond into 11th edition of Warhammer 40,000. Why would Games Workshop change the core stratagems? Well, if you hadn't been following 10th edition, 7 of the 11 core stratagems have already been changed. If that surprises you, I will explain their changes, but my point is that the core stratagems have already been changed a lot after half of an edition, and there can be more changes and replacements coming. So I will also read out the 10 new stratagems that you can use instead of the core stratagems. But you need to know, in this video, stratagems are not the only change to 40k mentioned. 4 of the core stratagems are the same as they were at the start of the edition. Only 4. Counter-offensive is 2 command points and allows you to fight with one of your units in the fight phase after an enemy unit has fought in the fight phase. This is an interrupt stratagem. Epic Challenge gives one of your characters precision in the fight phase, so if you're attacking an attached unit, you can stab the enemy character. It's an assassination stratagem, not so much a dueling stratagem. They don't get to fight back with precision unless they also use the stratagem. Smokescreen lets a unit with the smoke keyword go to ground and get stealth. This gives them +1 to their armor save and makes enemies -1 to hit with ranged weapons. Usually this is used on tanks. They are the ones that most often want the smokescreen stratagem if they have the smoke keyword. Go to ground gives one of your infantry units a 6+ invulnerable save and the benefit of cover in the shooting phase. It's very useful for your fragile infantry like neophytes. It is especially useful for the Imperial Guard in the recon detachment because this is a way of getting the benefit of cover, and in that detachment, if you have the benefit of cover, you also increase your armor save by an additional 1. So those stratagems are the same as they were at the start of the edition. The others have changed. Command reroll now works with fast dice rolling. So if you needed to really make 1 armor save and you had to roll 7 dice, you can roll all 7, and if there was 1 failure, you could reroll that dice. Previously, without this quick rolling addendum, you would have to roll the dice 1 at a time, then decide after like the 3rd one, that's a failure. Do you want to bother re-rolling it? You re-roll it, then you roll the rest of the dice. Which could mean it was pointless because you end up rolling 2 1s in the last 2 rolls. Now with quick rolling, you just roll all 7, you can see, there's 2 failures, I needed there to be no failures for me to live, it's not worth using the stratagem, I die. Or you can see, there is 1 failure, yes, I am very definitely going to use command reroll to try and make it a success. Rapid Ingress allows one of your units in reserves to arrive in the enemy movement phase. Because Deep Strike only works in your movement phase, as an out-of-phase rule, you couldn't use Rapid Ingress and Deep Strike together. Because the out-of-phase rule means that you can't use things that say in your movement phase or in your shooting phase with things that happen outside of those, even if you are moving like it's your movement phase or shooting like it is your shooting phase. It isn't. The stratagem was changed to work with Deep Strike and not just units walking on from the board with strategic reserves. Demon and Genestealer Cult players everywhere were much happier. The Fire Overwatch stratagem has changed the most. It has changed multiple times. It allows you to shoot in your opponent's turn, and with torrent weapons that auto-hit, it is especially valuable. Otherwise you hit on a 6+. The changes to it meant you need line of sight, so you can't fire indirect fire weapons at the enemy, and an additional change meant it can't be used at the end of a charge move, so there is no confusion over a unit getting charged using Big Guns Never Tire or pistols to shoot. Big Guns Never Tire and pistols allow you to shoot in your own shooting phase while in engagement range. The out of phase rules clarification in the rules commentary says no, you can't. So the change to Overwatch got rid of that does it work or does it not argument. Insane Bravery was a very good stratagem. I thought it was one of the best stratagems. You fail a Battleshock test? No, you didn't. In an attempt to make Battleshock more effective, Insane Bravery now has to be used before rolling a Battleshock test instead of after failing one, and it is a once per game stratagem. Most often I use it when I need to hold an objective or complete an action. You can't complete an action when battle shocked. So I'll use it on the one remaining guy in a unit, know that he's going to pass his battle shock test, then complete an action. But I won't be able to do that more than once. I will have to pass a battle shock test if I want to do something similar in the following turn. Grenades are a great stratagem for turning up and doing some mortal wounds. Their change is to say you have to be more than eligible to shoot and not yet shot. You also can't have advanced or fallen back. It was common to use abilities like the Tactical Doctrine so that your Space Marine units can fall back and still shoot. You were eligible to shoot with grenades, so you use grenades. Well, now you can't. If you are fallen back, it doesn't matter if you can fall back and shoot normally, you can't fall back and use this stratagem. The other little change was to make it so it triggers off one model. Previously, if an enemy unit was partly behind a building and within 8 inches of you, but a different model in the unit could see it, then that enemy unit was within 8 inches and visible to your unit, even if the only model that could see them was 12 inches away. Now it has to all come from the same model. One model that can see the enemy, and that model is within 8 inches of the enemy. Tank Shock changed for which stat it triggers from. It changed from the strength characteristic of a weapon to the toughness of the unit. It stopped small vehicles with strong melee weapons dominating where size should matter. Paragon warsuits were the perfect example. They were rolling 14 dice under the old stratagem for Tank Shock. Now they're rolling 7, and you will be better off using an Immolator instead, which rolls 10 dice. And finally, Heroic Intervention was changed from being 2 command points to 1 command point. This made it a lot more usable. That is a lot of changes to how the rules work for the core stratagems. So what about these new stratagems? What are they all about? If you are using them, you don't just get CP, you also get 1 ECP at the start of every player turn, an Exigence command point. These are special command points that can only be spent on the Exigence Stratagems, the stratagems you use instead of having access to the core stratagems. There is no other way of gaining these ECP points. I know the P stands for points, but it didn't feel right leaving the sentence hanging. Regular command points can also be spent on Exigence Stratagems. For example, a player gains 1 CP and 1 ECP at the start of their turn. They use their 1 CP on a stratagem from their army's detachment and spend their 1 ECP to use one of the cheaper Exigence Stratagems. Later in the battle, the same player uses 1 CP and 1 ECP together to use one of the more expensive Exigence Stratagems that cost 2 ECP, or they can use 2 command points. But because they are stratagems and interact with command points, you could use a Captain or Canoness ability that reduced the cost of those stratagems by 1. Half of these Exigence Stratagems cost 2 points, half of them cost 1 point. Yeah, I'm going to go over what they are, and why they are a replacement for the core stratagems, which should be evident. They do much the same thing as many of the core stratagems, but can be even stronger, giving even the worst detachments like the Brood Brothers Auxilia or many of the Imperial Agents detachments something good to spend their command points on. So now we're going to go through the new stratagems and what they are a good replacement for. Some of these stratagems look to mitigate some of the more gamey moves we see. I don't really mean gamey, but tactics that you don't think of from reading the main rules. Tactics like moving to always be out of line of sight because all of your terrain is L-shaped cardboard with no windows and the board is covered with them, or move blocking, just standing in front of an enemy to prevent their units from going places. These first few stratagems all cost 1 ECP. Break the Line allows a mounted or beast unit to make a normal move and adds 2d6 to the move and can move through enemy units. This stratagem goes along with Fly as another way to get around move blocking units, or over them, or through them. It is a normal move, so any rules like when you advance you don't roll a die, you get a set 6 as your advance move, that won't apply. This is not an advance move. But because this is a normal move, your already fast mounted units can still charge. This could be a first turn charge because of the increased 2d6 speed, and now you have realized how powerful these exigency stratagems can be. Crushing Advance means that Titanic units are not one to be slowed by move blocking enemies. A lot of them have rules to step over intervening terrain in units, but with Crushing Advance, you can normal move with 1 extra d6 of movement and drive through enemies with your Titanic Shadow Sword. You need to end the move out of engagement range, but you can drive over lesser creatures, like non-titanic tanks, and cause mortal wounds to them. Very cool. And because you didn't advance, you moved as fast as an advanced move, but made a normal move, so you can shoot and charge. With Valorous Charge, you can go very far indeed. You can charge up to 18 inches and roll 3d6 instead of 2d6. For 1 command point? Yeah, I think these are getting silly. So arrive from reserves and 3d6 charge, that will give you on average 10 inches. It isn't a guaranteed charge, but with bonuses to charge like the Orc's Here We Go or the Genestealer Cult Our Time Is Nigh, it is as good as guaranteed. Using Break the Line and then using Valorous Charge gives you an absurdly fast unit. But what if you want to shoot better when coming from reserves, or generally have improved shooting? Enhanced Ammunition increases the range of your attacks by 12 inches or 6 inches if they are torrent weapons. Seraphim love this. Inferno pistols and hand flamers become 18-inch range, much like 8th edition. You don't need to be on top of your enemy to shoot them dead. You can be near to line of sight blocking cover, shoot from a great distance, and then do the Seraphim Bop, the Seraphim Hop, and angelically move out of harm's way. If your opponent has agreed to use these stratagems, Overwatch is off the table. No Overwatch. So you won't be shot when arriving from reserves. If you want to get an enemy unit in cover, one way to do it is targeted demolition. One monster or vehicle that ends a move within 2 inches of area terrain can pick it up and shake it really hard. All the enemy models within each take a mortal wound on a 6+, or a 5+ if your monster or vehicle had a toughness of 10 or higher. And the interesting exploit for this stratagem is that it is each time a model ends a move this phase. So if you had some way of moving your unit multiple times in the movement phase, you can cause up to another 6 mortal wounds. These stratagems all cost 1 ECP or CP, or it was free to have a Canonist with Jump Pack and a Seraphim hit the enemy with Inferno pistols from Deep Strike with Enhanced Ammunition. Targeted Demolition is the getting close version, but there is a 2 ECP stratagem for killing the enemies hiding in terrain with your shooting weapons. Inescapable Augury gives your shooting unit indirect fire, but it reduces your weapon range to a maximum of 12 inches. If an opponent's unit is hiding behind a wall with no windows, no problem, you shoot them anyway, but at -1 to hit as per indirect fire. You can't use this stratagem and targeted ammunition on the same unit in the same phase, so you can't be reduced to 12-inch range, shoot indirectly, but also have increased the range by another 12 inches. Not allowed. Victory or Death is a stratagem you use instead of counter-offensive. For 2 ECP, you fight on death, guaranteed for all the models in the unit, and it lasts until the end of the phase, so if you're attacked by more than one enemy unit, if you have models that don't die against the first enemy unit's attacks, you can still fight on death by any models killed by the second enemy unit. I prefer this to counter-offensive because counter-offensive can only be used after one enemy unit has fought. Victory or Death gets in straight away knowing that unit is not gonna go down without a fight, and it could be combined with Hammer Blow. In the shooting phase or the fight phase, one unit from your army that has not been selected to shoot or fight this phase can have this stratagem used on them, though you can only use this stratagem once per turn, because of how powerful it is. It is an immensely powerful attack against one of the enemy's tougher units. Your unit gets +1 to hit, good, +1 to wound, great, and ignores any AP reduction, so Armor of Contempt is useless, and it ignores damage modifiers. Awesome. This is the stratagem to kill a Catan. Easily worth 2 command points. It is what the Battle Sisters need so that our melter weapons can get through vehicles' armor. If you were infantry, there is a way to avoid ever getting hit by this with a different stratagem. Hit the deck. An improvement on Go to Ground. It's infantry, beasts, or swarm units only. The unit gets stealth and cannot be targeted over 18 inches, though you maybe won't think it's better if you're using the recon detachment for the Imperial Guard. This stratagem is used at the start of the shooting phase instead of when targeted by an attack, and you are safer for the whole phase. It can help you avoid indirect fire, which is often very long range. If one of your units is exposed and all of the enemy wants to shoot at them, Now you've avoided getting hit at all from some weapons, and against the others, the enemies are at -1 to hit, as per stealth. Interception is 2 ECP and used at the end of your opponent's charge phase. One unit from your army that is not within engagement range of one or more enemy units can declare a charge. It does not require an enemy unit to have made a charge nearby like Heroic Intervention. This is very powerful to give combat armies the power of charging against shooting armies that do not want to be in combat. You can't move block a powerful enemy combat unit and say, okay, yeah, I'm gonna die, but it's gonna take all of your turn to do it. No, they will use interception, they will get into combat with you, and then you die in your own turn, then that unit is free and not move blocked anymore. There is no charge bonus, which means you don't get the fight first benefit, but my Locus and Acolytes or Metamorphs would love this, because they fight first anyway. It is also not limited to units within 6 inches. If you are within 12 inches of an enemy unit, you can try that charge roll. I like the Core Stratagems. I use them in every game. At some point I've used all of them, so the Core Stratagems are good and I don't really want them to be replaced. Using Exigence Stratagems removes Command Reroll, Fire Overwatch and Rapid Ingress, which are integral to how I use some units in some of my armies. But Valorous Charge, Enhanced Ammunition, Interception and Hammer Blow are very tempting replacements. What do I like about the Exigence Stratagems? Well, they replace the Core Stratagems instead of being more stratagems. I don't want the 8th, 9th edition situation of having access to more stratagems than minutes in the day and knowing that one of them, somewhere, will save me in this moment if only I can find it. The Exigence Stratagems are really strong and not going to be easily passed over. As a change to the game, it has impact. If you have a poor detachment, these can keep you going as they are for everyone. But if you have a good detachment rule, it can make a strong army into an absurdly good army. Think of the Host of Ascension. You come from reserves and can have sustained hits and ignore cover. Well, now you can also add +1 to hit, +1 to wound, ignore any damage modifiers or armor penetration modifiers, and you don't need to stack on a Primus and any other stratagems to do this. But you could. I don't think the Exigence Stratagems needed their own type of resources to manage and track. Command points were fine. Or if you could choose to get ECP instead of CP at the start of a player turn, then they become optional and meaningful depending on how much you wanted them. That is a way to do it. Or don't allow command points to be used on these stratagems as well as ECP. It makes acquiring the strongest stratagems very easy. And Exigency is a stupid name. These White Dwarf rules are just that. White Dwarf rules that are optional. These are not balance patch updates that enforce what is standard or normal as the way of playing Warhammer 40,000. These are rules for you to ignore at your discretion. These White Dwarf rules are not intended to be the default, but they can be if you want. That is the situation for now. Quote, when playing a game of Warhammer 40,000, be it match play, crusade, or any other form of play, that seems to be their current way of saying normal games, if you and your opponent both agree, you can use one set of Aspect of War rules in that game, like these stratagems, instead of the Core Stratagems. These Exigency Stratagems are one way of changing up an aspect of the core rules, but that doesn't mean they are here once and then done. White Dwarf has been a playground for a lot of rules that become permanent parts of 40k. Deployment zones, mission rules, unit abilities, extra unit rules, why not also stratagems? The swapping of the core stratagems is not the only change to the rules in the White Dwarf, and even if the core stratagems were not changed later in 10th edition or in 11th edition, I really expect these two other changes to come into mainstream 40k games, and sooner rather than later. You know how I just said it was too easy to get enough points to use the Exigency Stratagems? Well, what if it was even easier? An Underdog bonus. From Battle Round 2 onwards, at the start of the battle round, if one player has at least 5 victory points less than their opponent, that player gains 1 ECP. If that player has at least 15 points less than their opponent, that player also gains 1 command point. And presumably that would count as the 1 command point maximum you can get in addition to the regular command point you get at the start of a player turn. you can only have one additional command point per battle round. So if you went second, you could tactically choose not to score any secondary missions to get victory points if your opponent already had 5 victory points in the first battle round. This would give you an extra ECP. Who would do that? Well, Genestealer Cult players who want a strong turn attacking in their turn 2, now with even more resources to do so at the cost of a few victory points for missions that may have been hard to do if you only had a few units on the board in turn 1 because a Primus had sent 3 more into reserves. This is a comeback mechanic similar to Secret Missions and Gambits from the Pariah Nexus and Leviathan mission decks respectively. If you are losing, you have more resources. As an underdog mechanic, aside from deliberately keeping your score low to get more resources, it does favour the losing player and makes for closer games. We like that! The game being decided by turn 2 is not usually much fun for either player. The underdog mechanic is part of Age of Sigmar 4th edition, and there was a massive influence on 10th edition of 40k by Age of Sigmar 3rd edition. I can absolutely see underdog rules becoming part of 11th edition or appearing in the next 40k mission deck instead of a set of secret missions. I also expect to see things like the Age of Sigmar fallback rules in 40k. You can always choose to fall back, but take D3 mortal wounds when you do. Doesn't matter about battle shock, doesn't matter about moving through enemy models. Any fallback move means you take D3 mortal wounds. It is called mortal damage in Age of Sigmar. If you get wounded in Age of Sigmar, you reduce your health. It makes more sense than the 40k wording of getting wounded on your toughness, which reduces your wound, but only if you fail a save. If you pass the save, even though you were wounded, you weren't. I expect the terminology to change too. The last change is a change to reserves. Strategic reserves can be up to 50% of your army, much like the Nakmud Crusade book in rules I've already gone over in another video. But Nakmud enforces it and does extra things with a sideboard of additional units. Half of your army has to be in reserve. But the option to have up to half of your army in reserves could be a permanent change. Currently in 10th edition, up to 25% of your army can be in strategic reserves, but with rules like Deep Strike, up to half of your army can be in some form of reserves. I can see this table becoming the permanent standard, if not soon, then in 11th edition, and then I will say, I told you so. If I remember. Even if you remind me, you will have to tell me, yeah, you did, in the video about the core stratagems being replaced. And then I would rewatch it and go, so I did. Call me Nostradamus. Or Cassandra, if it's a bad future. But really, call me Christian von Carmian, and you can subscribe to the Christian von Carmian YouTube channel right here, right now. Would you like to see more White Dwarf rules that could be part of 40k in the future? And if you recognize a deployment layout that became part of a recent mission deck, let me know in the comments. My darlings and viewers, have a great day of 40k.